So, one of the things that I've got to do with my life is try to figure out what to do with my life. Um, More than that, I've got to figure out what's important to me and what's important to, like, the world, what should be important to everybody. Um, and beyond that, I've got to actually figure out, is it something that's practical or doable, or is this just something that's an abstract goal and should remain that? And, I should pick something that's more realistic as a goal. I've got these really big aspirations and stuff that I hold as important, um, just in terms of ethics, what is important, and trying to scale that back to, things that I should be doing is a whole lot harder. But I've also got, these kind of things of, that I imagine, that I imagine that I should be able to do, or that humanity as a whole should be able to do. Um, Whether it's at this point in history or at some point in the future, um, things that we should be accomplishing. Uh, the movement of civilization and where it's supposed to be going. Um, and those are really big questions. And when I try to um, break that down into you know my role in that, or whether that's even something that's possible for humanity to accomplish, it's it's those ideas are too concrete. So, like, solving cancer, um, is that a that's too concrete of an idea. Um, it should be abstracted into, well, we should be opposed to disease, or we should be opposed to mortality. Um, and you go from there of, okay, so why is it that we're opposed to mortality? What is the inherent goodness of life? Um, and it doesn't even have to be of human life. It could be just life in general. Okay, if humans are wiped off the face of the earth and all that's left are tardigrades, um, if all life in the universe except for, a few strands of DNA that just kind of replicate themselves, um, and aren't even single-celled organisms, or, just not even that. It could be just be RNA, like, that's duplicates once every um, few millennia or something. Uh, and should it even be that? Should it be just be um, should it just be some remnants of life, showing that life once existed in the universe? And should it even be that? It just keeps going and going back to trying to figure out from these concrete examples, what an abstract value should be, and from that abstract value you can apply that to more realistic stuff on an individual level. So, like, okay, if and just kind of follow my train of thought, because I don't want to, like, leave that hanging. Um, all right, so it wouldn't even have to be. What is it about replication of life that makes it important? Is it even that replication? Uh, is that replication important in and of itself? Um, if it was just some chemical processes and you've got like a star or something that's continuing its nuclear fission. Um, do stars use fusion? I thought the fission happened like in the outer atmosphere of stars. Okay, so apparently stars don't use fission. Um, so, like, alright, say you've got a star carrying out fusion, because apparently stars just use fusion. And that process continues for X number of years, and then eventually the star burns out. And maybe uses fusion when it explodes. I'll have to look it up later. It's not. It doesn't make for a very good video if I'm just stopping and looking stuff up every few minutes. But you've got a naturalistic process that's continuing, over a really long period of time. At what point does that thing stop mattering? When does something matter? Not when is something matter, just when does it stop becoming interesting? Yeah, I kind of need that as a key light. Just using my monitor as a key light. It's just there's certain things in the universe that I think differ from like kind of dead things in the universe. When you've got an asteroid that's just going through space and, well, at that point it would be a comet. Um, it's not really doing anything until it actually, hits runs into a planet or a star. There's no interaction with other things that are going on, and when it's by itself, it just seems like it's pretty pointless. But once it strikes a planet and ends up, you know, loaning some of its elements to what could be on that planet or its organic compounds, um, end up being the building blocks of life on a planet. Or, when it just makes a dent in like a moon or something, or when it goes on to feed a star by just being a little droplet of ice, feeding hydrogen reactions. There's something going on. Um, and it's not life, it's just kind of these naturalistic universal phenomena. Um, well, not universal, just natural phenomena. And, it's as long as those things are happening, I think you could say that, the universe is just continuing to do stuff. It's not really, after the universe reaches a point where life isn't sustainable on any planets, and there's just no heat being produced, and there's not a single rock or just gaseous nebula that's can support life. The universe stops being an interesting place. Um, for the living things. But for the unliving things, just it seems like it stops mattering when there's no interaction between those things. Um, it's like I think it's probably best to say that the universe stops being interesting to living things. The point at which the universe will stop being interesting is when there's nothing else going on in it. Every every black hole that can form has formed. Um, and eventually even black holes, once they've spent their gas and the gases stop coalescing into other black holes and stuff, black holes do die eventually. Um, and there's going to reach a point where no more black holes are dying, and the universe is just in a process of dying. I mean, even more so than it is right now, because right now the universe is dying. Even when there's life in it and new life um, is coming into being, uh, the universe as a whole is just, it's entropic. It's it's just the physics are headed towards just this universe where there's nothing going on but two photons running from each other. Um, and all there's going to be is just a universe that's stretched so thin that, there's no vacuum force that can bring any two specks of light back together. I think you could, life has got a really narrow definition, both in science and in common parlance. And in this context, there's just kind of, it's probably just better to call it stuff. There's stuff that's happening, and, it has an effect on other stuff. And I think, as long as there's stuff going on, the universe is worthwhile, and it's worth trying to figure out how things work in it. As long as there's any two photons glued to each other, there's going to be some value that you can apply to it. It's a lot more obvious to say that life is the most important thing in the universe. Life isn't just important to life. Life is important to the universe. Life is in the universe, but the universe is not life. And the non-living parts of the universe, those non-living things they have an effect on other non-living things, and they have an effect on life. So I think because those non-living things have an effect on other non-living things, they are, they can't matter to those other things, but I think as far as you could say that any one thing being important to another thing, I think that could apply to non-living things. A rock sitting on top of the ground, it's like, okay, that has an effect on the ground has an effect on the rock. Those things have an effect on each other, so the ground is important to the rock, and the rock is important to the ground. The rock doesn't have any agency or anything, and it doesn't have any life to it, but if all the universe was just a couple of rocks or a couple of subatomic particles, then and would it still matter to the living things today? If the universe unwinds itself completely, as the universe unwinds itself completely, what in that context should matter to us as living things today? If there was a way to just, out of all of the human endeavors throughout history and the combined efforts of, if there's somehow, other living beings throughout the universe that we're completely unaware of, who somehow collaborate with each other to, undertake the one single effort of just saying, at some point in the future, there will always be these two subatomic particles, interacting with each other. No matter what happens, in the universe, heat death or no heat death, those two things are always going to be connected. Um, for me at least, that's kind of subverting the natural order. And, I think that subversion would just make everything that anyone has ever done impactful. Um, not because it's something that our planet has done, but, say you've got the aliens out there and they're somehow managed to employ their minds to create something like that, where it's just, they've taken something that was up until then an inescapable fate, um, and found a way to preserve some remnant of, of life in the universe. Just kind of to leave a mark of any kind at all. For me, that would make everything that's happened in the universe, from the initial expansion to the heat death, a worthy, something that had an impact eventually. Because as we stand right now, we've already lost. It's like we're doomed. It doesn't matter if we, were to switch over to nuclear power, end all pollution, save planet Earth, stay around until, somehow save the sun from burning out and becoming like a, what do you call it, a brown dwarf. I don't know if that's what you call them, or if it's just like a brown star or something. And we were somehow able to dodge getting sucked into a black hole, from now until the heat death of the universe. None of that's going to matter, because because of entropy, you're just losing protons and just the smallest particles you can think of, just to this dissipative process. Gravity can't hold it. Magnetism can't hold it. The structure of our solar system and our galaxy, and the superclusters and so on. Nothing can keep that together. And the attitude of a lot of people is just fatalistic. It's like, well, I don't care, I'm not going to be around. When you ask the same people who want to save endangered species and prevent global warming from getting any worse, or, by some just completely in the face of the odds, managing to keep the Earth sustainable, you ask those same people, okay, do you want humans, or do you want some form of life to continue until the sun burns out? And they'll be like, well, what do I care? I'm not going to be around anyway. There's people who are more nihilistic and are like, well, humans shouldn't be around, we're destructive. And it's like, okay, at this point, assuming the totally unlikely scenario that there are some humans who are left on the earth who would somehow want to benefit the earth somehow overall and not become a destructive influence on it. You know, if you ask those same people, okay, well, let's say there's some life that would stick around, you know, or more than that, like, just, okay, say that humans somehow became a positive influence on the earth. Would you still want to have humans around forever? And they're like, no, the sun is just going to consume the earth eventually, and you know, what we do, we shouldn't really care about what happens after we're gone, or what happens to the earth after living things are gone. You know, it's just like the world ends with you. Like the world ends when you go, the world goes. You know, so as far as they're concerned, you know, the world is just, you know, the world can screw itself. It can just disappear and they're not going to care. And I'm not like that. You know, I don't want to see these existential you know, existential threats just destroy everything. I don't want the sun to burn out, and I don't want the heat death of the universe to be the end of all things. You know, so that's when I start thinking of just these kind of mostly unfalsifiable things, but just, you know, kind of anything that gives me hope. You know, I think of, okay, so let's say when the universe was a lot smaller than it is right now, you know, space itself hadn't expanded, and the universe is still together in this tight little singularity. Maybe there's other singularities out there, and you know, maybe the universe just kind of pops these things out all the time, where you know, things go from not existing at all to just popping into existence. You know, because of, like, I don't know, photons reach a critical speed or something. It's just all these imaginary ideas that are not based in reality, but are ones that I want to, you know, I want those things to be possible, because I don't want to accept that, you know, 100 trillion years down the road, everything's just going to stop. You know, let's say you took the universe and look at it after the last proton leaves the last photon. And you were to zoom out all the way back. To where all those things, you know, were to be like you're looking at them on a computer screen, and you could just fit them all down into one pixel. You know, would it look like there's another pixel over here? You know, that's not on the same axis or something, and you just can't see it because they're so far apart. And maybe a photon from that pixel will someday hit a photon from another pixel, and just the shear force or something like causes, you know, another Big Bang or something, and life continues, you know, like a cycle. And, you know, it's just, it's unrealistic, it's pure fantasy, and, you know, but when I think of those things, they bring me some comfort. But, that comfort doesn't mean anything if it's based on like a false understanding of the way the universe works. It's just, it's avoidance, and it's not a healthy way of thinking. Um, and even thinking in that way, it's kind of letting go of your individuality, in the here and now, and it's saying, okay, I'm not really that important in the grand scheme of things, and that's the realistic look at the universe, that you're not important, and the Earth isn't important, and our solar system is important, our galaxy is important, our supercluster isn't important. The universe in itself is only of self-contained importance. Is it like in Men in Black, where our universe is relatively tiny, and it's just another subatomic speck compared to what is actually what's actually out there. Um, and those kind of things are just unfalsifiable too. What if we're so all this heat, that the universe has produced, it just makes the little cogs in whatever bigger universe is out there, this macro universe, and that 100 trillion year look. That 100 trillion year long history is just like the briefest of microseconds in what's going on out there, and things are happening so much slower, at that big scale than we're even capable of perceiving. It's like, that might be the case, but it's just like, other thought experiments where it doesn't really have any practical applicability, and it's not something that, if it is provable, we're not going to see the impacts of that truth ever. It's unfalsifiable, so it doesn't really matter. Might as well be imaginary. And there's that phrase, the time to believe that something exists is when you see evidence of it. And we've seen no evidence that there's this larger macro universe, and I don't even know how you would go about demonstrating that bigger universe exists. It's kind of looking for something in the gaps of our understanding, and pinning your hopes in it. So it's kind of like this. It's not healthy to look at those possible things, or those unfalsifiable things, and look at them as a possibility. Or assert that it's a possibility without knowing anything in favor of it or contrary to it. It's like, okay, so what if it's like in chord and here's a who or something, where somewhere down inside the, subatomic particles, there's these. Actually, I can use Men in Black as an example again too, because it kind of had this macro universe and it had a micro universe. In the cat's collar. So, what if we look down inside of a photon and it turns out that, there's an entire universe inside of that that's producing this light particle. But again, it's like just kind of assuming there's some kind of trait involved in something we don't understand that's causing a thing to happen. There's just no evidence for that. We don't completely understand the way that things work, but that doesn't mean we can just plug in whatever we want, anytime we don't understand something. So we've got to operate based on what we do understand. And what we do understand is, it's bad news. It's the worst news. It's, the worst thing that you could possibly imagine. When humanists talk about not being afraid of death, they talk about how, there's a natural cycle to life where, okay, you die, but the universe continues on without you. There's hope to be found in that. And it's encouraging to know that, if you die tomorrow, there's still going to be, the world isn't going to end, and life will find a way to carry on. But tardigrades aren't. They're not invulnerable. They die eventually. They've got limited lifespans. Just every other thing. And eventually there's going to be an environment that they're going to encounter that is going to be uninhabitable. It doesn't matter if you're talking about some bizarre alien life form that's managed to survive inside a really arid or frozen environment. That environment isn't going to stay around forever. So it's like, okay, there's no point in leaving markers, grave markers, when there is not going to be anything left to read them, or knowing that eventually at some point, let's say you have, you plan on your entire civilization collapsing or your entire species collapsing, so you leave a marker for the next species to come across, like in Dead Space. Although it's kind of a different thing, because that was kind of a Living Dead cult. So I guess better example would just be something original. You plan on your species and your environment dying out, so you leave some kind of marker that will survive in any environment for the next thing to read and go, oh, there was actually a species here. Maybe we can, remember them fondly or something. But what happens when you run out of environments for species to evolve into and come across these markers. What happens when, after tardigrades have evolved into a species that's somehow grown big enough to read, like, the letters, on a gravestone left by humans, or monkeys or something that have evolved after humans, left behind their marker. What happens when you don't have any space left for living things to leave their mark? Where there's nowhere you can go where that marker will last until the next species rises up to read it. What happens when you run out of places for species to evolve? It's like you're just doing these futile things to kind of abet your own fears about what's going on around you. And that's the way we operate nowadays. It's like, from BoJack Horseman, what Mr. Peanut Butter says is just, you don't think about philosophy or he says something to the effect of, you just do unimportant things to distract you until you die. It's like, that's it. You can live your life one way or another, but that's not going to change the fundamental nature of the Earth or the way our universe works. I'm going to say universe at least 200 more times in this video, so get used to it, I guess. There's going to come a time where the universe is unable to survive its own limited resources. It's like everything is a limited resource. There's no such thing as a sustainable energy source. That's not the way thermodynamics works. Thermodynamics works a certain way in a closed system, and it works a different way in an open system. And our universe is an open system. It's losing energy. The particles aren't sticking around. They're just going off into the unknown universe, beyond the observable universe, beyond what we could ever possibly observe or ever will be able to. Let's say we've got superclusters on the outside of the known universe and outside the observable universe, and they're emitting photons. Eventually the photons from everything are just going to leave, and they're just going to go off into nothingness. We don't know whether our universe is infinite or whether it's finite. I can't think of if our universe was infinite. What I'm trying to say is, there was a limited amount of mass that you had, and a limited amount of energy that you had in the singularity before the Big Bang, and you can't just get infinite from that finite. You've got infinite nothing, and then you've got what we live in, which is a whole lot of something. I just imagine this one little speck. Well, I don't have to imagine it. I mean, this is the way it was. It was just one speck in the middle of nothing. Um, and all the photons are just going out into that nothing. And it's just our universe is heading, like we're all heading towards that big nothing. Um, where all of our actions are futile, and all the actions of the universe, that have ever happened are futile. It's like the Big Bang might as well not even happened. We might as well have never been born. Um, and the universe is just going to be this dark, cold, empty place, devoid of life, devoid of anything interesting happening at all. It's just kind of scattered to the nether winds. There's nothing we can do to stop it. We can hold on to things as tightly as we can, but it just kind of eventually is going to slip through our grasp, and it's just going to all spill out and run out of itself. It's just kind of tearing itself apart, and there's nothing we can do to calm it down or slow it down. There's no easy or even difficult fix that we can make. It's just totally out of our control. It's like the universe itself is out of control. I think that's what scared me the most when I was watching this one PBS documentary when I had high fever, when I had the flu. It's called like Secrets of the Universe, and it was terrifying because we were talking about all these extremely violent phenomena in the universe, all these black holes and pulsars and just hollow emptiness of the void, and there's this vacuum energy that they didn't talk about vacuum energy, but it's like vacuum energy isn't gonna do jack squat to stop the heat death of the universe. It's just gonna sit there and lose its ability to affect anything. So I can talk about this abstract, more concrete stuff all I want. It's like it doesn't really matter. And I've been a lot more pragmatic in terms of goals that I do accomplish in the near term, like or fantasies that I wish I could act out. Um, into impossible stuff, but still feasible stuff. Thinking about like, oh, I wish I could cure cancer. I wish I could stop global warming. I wish I could stop war. I wish I could stop death and starvation and disease. And those are all more, all of those are unlikely, but still more feasible things than saying, I don't want the universe to die. Compared to that goal, those things are just like, a walk in the park. Easy as pie, piece of cake. You're talking about defying known laws of physics, just in order to buy yourself some more time. And, a lot of people, when they're religious or they're humanist, that's really all they're trying to do is buy themselves, like, personally, more time. But what I'm talking about is buying existence itself some more time. The heat death of the universe is one challenge to be overcome, but who knows what kind of other challenges there would be further down the road. And the whole thing is like, I'm not even, a physicist or an astronomer, so there's the cosmos, and then there's the, what are the two different kinds of studies when you're talking about studying the universe? There's astronomy and there's what? Cosmic physicists. And they talk about uniting the two, where you've got the looking at things at a small scale versus looking at things on a big scale, and trying to figure out how those two things relate. There's things you can learn about the small things by looking at the big things, and there's things you can learn about the big things by looking at the small things. And it's like, I don't know either one of those things. I don't even know philosophy that well, but when it comes down to this issue, there don't seem to be many people that are interested in trying to alter the course of events. It's like, are scientists just fatalistic? Are they just fatalistic and they're in the business for money? And it's like, okay, I go to work every day, I know some stuff, I feel good about myself for being smarter than everyone else, I go home to my mansion, and I don't care about what else happens in the universe. I'm not going to try to change things, I just need to accept them. And really, I don't even care about science that much. It's really just the money in science that I care about. So, is that what they're like? Are they so dispassionate about knowledge that it's only the superficial things surrounding it that matter in themselves and not the underlying consequences that it might have for them? don't know. I'm kind of running out of energy here, so I'm gonna try to keep this video below an hour. Because whenever I try to think about, big questions like this, it always seems to come back to the heat death of the universe and our place in it. I don't think of, I spend a lot of time thinking about the immediate problems that we face just because those are, relatively realistic. But once you stop concentrating so much on your own personal interests and you start looking at what, or even, the interests of Earth, or just of life in general in the galaxy, in the universe. Once you stop being so narcissistic about your own place in the universe, you get a lot harder questions, and I don't know the answers to those. I don't know. That's probably a good place to end this video. It's just kind of, I look for answers, but really all it does is give me more questions.